Welcome to Behavioral Grooves. I'm Kurt Nelson, and I'm here virtually with my co-host and co-founder, Tim Houlihan. Woo-hoo. We're going on 8 years together here at Behavioral Grooves. Can you believe that, Tim? I'm crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
And we have looked forward to every single conversation that we've had. There is no exception to that. At least not that I remember. And This one, again, we are super excited about this conversation. We're diving deep into a discussion that might just change how you think about money, think about wealth, and what it means to live a meaningful life.
Oh, that's right, Kurt. We had the pleasure of speaking again with Dr. Daniel Crosby, the author of a new book, The Soul of Wealth. And he's also a good buddy of ours for many years. Now, Daniel isn't just another finance expert telling you how to get rich quick. This book is not a 5-step program because Daniel realizes that real life is way more complex than 5 simple steps. He's a behavioral scientist specializing in behavioral finance who spent years studying the psychology behind our relationship with money.
Yeah, and Tim, what's fascinating about our conversation is Daniel's approach. He argues that wealth isn't just about the numbers in your bank account. Boom. Wow.
Boom.
Right? Or even what that wealth could purchase. Boom, boom. Man, wealth is something that he has what he calls a soul. Now, this is not referring to some mystical or religious concept. He uses the word in a way of grounded in solid research, right? It's about human flourishing and what actually makes us happy.
Right. Daniel shared some pretty eye-opening insights about how we've essentially been sold a bill of goods when it comes to money. We've been told that wealth equals happiness, success, even moral superiority. But the data tells us a very different story. Despite unprecedented material prosperity, our society's general well-being has actually declined.
Yeah, and when we explored Daniel's framework for understanding the 4 major psychological biases that trip us up with money, ego, emotion, attention, and conservatism. But here's what I loved about Daniel's approach, that instead of fighting these biases, he shows us how to work with them. It's like this financial behavioral finance judo. Okay, oh my God. I'm glad I'm not a judo guy because I look silly as hell.
We couldn't help ourselves, but we did have to talk with Daniel about music because he's a great guitarist. He has exquisite taste in guitars as well. His first love of Radiohead and his appreciation for Brian Wilson's genius. Super fun conversation. There's also just something about his creative mind that is just totally gravitational for me. So,
all right. So listeners, go and plug in your Stratocaster and turn the volume up all the way to 11 for a conversation that brings together behavioral science, personal finance, philosophy, and yes, even some great music. And enjoy our conversation with Dr. Daniel Crosby.
Daniel Crosby, welcome back to Behavioral Grooves.
It's great to be back.
It's such a pleasure to have you. It's really fun to see you. We're going to loosen up with a speed round. So first question, Stratocaster or Les Paul?
Oh, Strat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm so happy to hear that.
When my wait. We talked about this before. My baby hands can't get around the baseball bat knack of the Les Paul. Now, clearly from an aesthetic perspective, the Les Paul is, to me, the prototypical look of a guitar. Like I like Les Paul shaped guitars, and I think that the Les Paul prototype was, unearthed from some sacred space and came from the ground in its perfect form. Stratocaster is kind of ugly, but the Strat plays better. How's that for balance?
That was nice.
Yeah. Tim, well, I did not know that you were a Stratocaster guy. I didn't know that.
Well, I've owned Stratocasters in the past. I've owned Telecasters in the past. I've never owned a Les Paul because every time I was playing with friends who had them, and I'd put it over my shoulder, it felt like I was putting a barge on, it was dragging a ship's anchor, and it was
Yeah.
like, this isn't fun.
So basically, you're just weak. Is that what it is? Is that?
I think that might be it. It's just revealing about my physique. That could be.
All right. Well, I'm sure you guys, we could go off on a whole tangent on guitars, as you guys did pre-show, and I was lost totally there. But let's keep going on the speed round. Daniel, would you rather live in a 35-year-old body with a 95-year-old mind, not man, or live in a 95-year-old body with a 35-year-old mind? Oh, sorry about that.
So I'm going to take the 35-year-old body with the 95-year-old mind. Now, how has senility set in? Are we allowed to ask those? I'm going to go 35.
It's one of those things. You can
never know.
Do you think you'll be good at 95? It's all up to you.
No, there's no way I'll be good at 95. So I'm going to go 30. I'm going to go 35. I'm going to go 35-year-old body, 95-year-old mind, with the generous assumption that, I've taken good care of my mind, and that I have all the wisdom and none of the senility at 95.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. See, I was just thinking I would go with the 95-year-old mind because I would have the senility and I wouldn't care. And then I would just be having a 35-year-old body being able to do whatever the hell I please.
You got this nice body and this who cares mind, this get off my lawn mind. Yeah, it's a good combo.
Okay. Third speed round question, Daniel. Would you rather double your income or double your time off?
Oh, I mean, double my time off. Not even close. I mean, that's what my whole book is about. Which brings us to the soul of wealth. No, but I would definitely, I would definitely double my time off. I mean, I'm not sure why I was born an American. Every time I send, my publisher is based in England.
Yeah.
And this is about the time of year that I'll send my publisher something looking for some help with something, and I'll get a note back saying they'll be back in 6 weeks because and I'm like, it must be nice.
You can move. There is that possibility. You could relocate to Europe, and
I think about it all the time.
All right, Daniel. Last of our speed round questions. True or false? Wealth is more about mindset than bank balance.
So,
look at this. He's thinking. This is not an easy question. It's not a true or false.
So this is so when you look at the literature, we're going straight there.
Okay.
These things are actually 1A and 1B. I mean, when you even look at how wealthy people feel or how contented they feel, there is a practical reality and call it a soulful reality, and they are almost always neck and neck. So you see things like when you look at how wealthy people feel, you see the two best determinants of that in one study were how much money they had, that's the practical reality, and then how much money they gave away. That's sort of the soulful reality. In another study on contentment, it was how much money they had, and then what was their reference class. So who are they comparing themselves to? So it's like, which of these is the greatest commandment, right? I mean, it's like you have to love God and love your neighbor. They're both important. The greatest commandment is that there is a physical reality to wealth, and that there is a soulful reality to wealth, and you can't have the one without the other. So that's a cop-out, but it's an evidence-based cop-out.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the book, right? Because we're talking about your new book, The Soul of Wealth. And you open the book with that strong claim that wealth must have a soul. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? And well, let's start with, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by a soul? How can wealth have a soul?
Well, there's lots of meanings for the word soul. I'm talking about the essence here. And for me, the essence of wealth is more than the dollars that you have in the bank. And there were two things that catalyzed me writing this book. One was I had sort of a health crisis that ended up being no big deal, but it was quite scary for a minute. And ended up being, no, I'm fine. But there was a moment there where I thought I wasn't, and that brought some things into sharp relief. And then learning about sort of the mental health crisis that we have going on when this country was founded, coming up on 250 years ago, 85% of the world was living in poverty. So that's $2 or less a day. Like everyone everywhere was poor, 200 years ago. Today, that number is about 8.5%, which is 8.5% too high. I don't want to minimize that, but like an incredible explosion in material wealth over 250 years. And you look at our well-being over that same time, and it's gone to hell. Over that time, we've created such tremendous financial wealth. Our well-being has fallen off a cliff. The average size of an American home has tripled in the post-war period, and yet people feel less wealthy than they were in the mid-40s. So what gives? And it just became really apparent to me that money in and of itself, wealth, material safety in and of itself was not enough, that there is a concurrent soulful reality to these things that needs to be addressed, or it just never quenches our thirst for more.
Yeah, there is this hedonic treadmill that we have, right? That we all live on to some degree, and we get challenged with this all the time because we are bombarded by consumerism, and we're bombarded by the social impact of the keeping up with the Joneses. These are big problems. I guess I'm kind of curious. What was it that sort of brought all this together for you? What was it like? This is the story that I want to tell.
Well, there were a few things. One, I mean, I really love money, like more than I should. I think about it. I work in finance. I write books about money. And then when I had this health scare, there was a moment where my wife was driving me to the hospital, and I'm bawling my eyes out in the front seat of her car. And I think I have a brain tumor, and I can't figure out what's wrong with me. And I'm, catastrophizing that my children are going to grow up fatherless and all this. And at this moment, I said to her, I would give it all away to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. I would give it all away in that moment.
Yeah.
This thing that I spend so much time worrying about was absolutely of no utility to me. And it was a big wake-up call. And then the other thing is, like, I work shoulder to shoulder with some enormously wealthy people, like 9 and 10 figures wealthy, right? But between our clients and, even some of my coworkers in the recent past have been enormously wealthy. And some of them were really happy and really centered and doing incredible, generous, kind, wonderful things with their wealth. And some of them who are in the 99.9th percentile for wealth in human history and globally felt like it wasn't enough and were still sort of clawing for more. And it was wild to watch. And so, it was a mix of observational stuff and personal stuff that led me to go, wow, this isn't everything. And unless there's this soulful element to it, it really just doesn't ever slake our thirst for more.
I think there's an interesting piece that you talked about there, the contrast between, it's not that people that are wealthy are all in this dystopian kind of world. You said there are some that were just really happy and really had a good life for themselves. And yet there were these others. And yet I think there is this, to your point of placing so much emphasis on wealth. And I think our society has a over index on material things and money. And you can see it in social media, you can see it in advertisements, you can see it in any type of media just in general, right? What is it that we are getting? Actually, let me take this question back. Let me rephrase this. What can we do if we have all of these inputs coming at us that are saying wealth is important? Wealth is, you're only going to be happy when you get that bigger house. You're only going to be happy when you get that 6-figure, that 7-figure, that 8-figure income. What can we do about that? I mean, it feels like it's just an over kind of pressing on us all the time.
Yeah, I think we need a new model, right? Because I think, people would say, "Oh, money's not that important," but there's a reason why we over-index on money, and it's because it's easy to measure. It's
Mhm.
easy to measure. Like, it's easy to see, it's easy to measure, and we treat it like it's liquid happiness, and it's not. So, in the book, in the first chapter of the book, I introduce the readers to something you all will know well, which is Martin Seligman's PERMA model, which is this
Yeah.
model for sort of measuring human flourishing. And look, like, I think the PERMA model is great. I love it. I use it all the time. But, there's other models too. And I candidly don't care which one you love. But like, that's a good one, right? It talks about holism. And, money's part of it because money can buy
Yeah.
us positive experiences, but hard work is part of it, and loving relationships and meaning and working for something bigger than yourself, and personal growth. And so it's only when we have a new yardstick to measure life by, because for so many people, the only yardstick they have, the only tool they have for measuring the success of their life is money. And look, money is a lot easier to gauge than the love my wife and children have for me. Right? I mean, I that's a little harder to put my finger on the pulse of that, but that doesn't mean it's not worth attending to or not worth measuring. So one thing that I think we need is to understand that this is the water that we're swimming in, right? I
Mhm.
think a lot of people take this for granted and accept at face value that money is everything you've been told it was. But look, 70% of the US economy is driven by consumerism. We are living in a world that has a vested interest in you caring about money and living above your means and prioritizing it. It literally is what makes our world go round. And if everyone read my book and sort of applied it, the economy would crash. So we'd all
But again, we
yeah.
say that like it's a bad thing if we're really truly looking at the world of if we want to be well-being people. And granted, we don't want the economy to crash. The money's a part of, as you said, it's part of the equation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be a little bit of economic setback. Might not be the worst thing in the world. So.
I feel that way often. Yeah.
Well, we talked to Abby Davison recently about her book, Money and Love.
Mhm.
And I'm just fascinated by what Kurt's been talking about, what you've been talking about, Daniel. We've tried to disentangle money from everything else, from well-being, from our love relationships, from all these different things, and it really doesn't work. We have over prioritized it, right? If
Mhm.
I understand you correctly, Daniel, you would agree that we've over prioritized it or elevated money to a level that is really unnecessary. But
Mhm.
it's not so much about trying to pull it out and pull the thread out of the fabric, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. It goes back to the physical reality and the psychological reality again. I still love money, and money still does good things in my life and in everyone's life. And it's still a material and important part of a relationship, or any other conversation you want to have. In fact, the only reason I still work in finance and haven't gotten bored off yet is because money touches every part of our lives. And so you can have a conversation about something that's sort of inherently more interesting to me, like relationships or love, And money's a piece of that, and a big piece of it. So it isn't about asceticism or just living in a monkish way or abstaining from caring about money. It's not that at all. It's just putting it in its proper context, because at this point there's such a halo effect around money, and people assume so many good things about people who have money that I think a lot of people pursue it and neglect more attainable and more sure and more holistic paths to happiness.
I want to dig down on that because I think that's a really interesting piece, that halo effect that money has on people and people's perception of people with money. And I heard something recently, and I can't remember who it was, but it was this idea that we have put people with money on a pedestal, that they're good people, and they're not. Just because you are a billionaire doesn't mean that you are good, or even that you're smart, or that you have some unknown wisdom. It means that you have made a lot of money, and that is basically it. And yet we look at those people with a sense of awe, and there is power with money, particularly when you get a lot of money. You can purchase certain things, whether they be physical or non-physical elements within that. And I there's not a question there. It's more of just a statement, like I do often, that this idea that money equates with something bigger and better as an individual, as we are as human beings, I think is misaligned. And I think if we could get away from that and just, you made a lot of money. Great. You made a lot of money. That doesn't put you on any other pedestal outside of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So your show has for many years talked about heuristics, right? So when we meet someone or when we're trying to evaluate someone, we have a limited set of heuristics, a limited set of rules of thumb by which to evaluate them. And I mean, money is sort of front and center. You look at other things like the way they look, and you see there's a halo effect with that too. We think people who are thin or attractive have a host of other positive characteristics. And what being thin means is that you have some mix of, of good eating habits and good genes, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what being thin means. And being wealthy means you're good at making money. It doesn't mean you're good at government efficiency or a host of to use a completely out of nowhere example. But we have limited data points, and so we generalize massively around something like money, and people get that. They go, look, if I'm wealthy, I'll be construed as intelligent and and generous and kind and hardworking and a million other things. And it means you're good at making money. But that's also never going to go away, because we're never going to have all the information, and how someone looks and how much money they have are sort of front and center. It's been interesting. It's been weird for me. In the last year, I've lost nearly 70 pounds. Through a program of diet and exercise. And it's been awesome. There's been a lot I have loved about it. But what is weird is that the world got easier for me and people got nice. I don't want to overstate it. It's not like anyone was terrible to me before, but it's like people are friendlier to me now. And that's disappointing.
It is.
It's disappointing that I'm playing life on an easier setting now as a thin person than I was as someone who was overweight. And it's sort of been an interesting A/B test within the same person.
Yeah, it is scary. Actually, it's not a happy message to carry.
Hey, this is Kurt, and we want to say thanks for listening to Behavioral Grooves, and we hope that you're enjoying this episode. But it feels a little bit one-sided. You're hearing from us, but we're not hearing from you.
This is Tim, and we have two suggestions to remedy that. The first is join our Facebook page and engage with us.
We want to talk with you. We want to hear your perspectives, and hopefully our Facebook page might be the place to have some of that interaction. So please come and join us.
The other recommendation we have for you is to leave us a quick rating. You know, the little 5-star thing at the bottom of your app? Or a short review. Just leave us a few words about what you like about behavioral groups. We'd very much appreciate it.
Thanks, and we now return you to our regularly scheduled programming.
I wanted to go back. You talked about your work in finance. Your scholarly work has been in psychology and in finance. And so you come to this from sort of a subsystem of behavioral science that a lot of people refer to as behavioral finance. And could you just tell our listeners a little bit about what is behavioral finance and what differentiates it from other aspects of behavioral science or just from investing and, you know, the sort of pure financial and wealth management sorts of things?
Yeah, so I'll give you the guy from Alabama definition of what behavioral finance is, and I think it's just finance that accounts for the messiness of human nature. And in one of my not my latest book, but the book before that, there was some research that I think about all the time. And it was a series of fMRI studies where they're monitoring electrical activity in the brain around different types of stimuli. So they're showing people stimuli around sex and death and politics and religion and money and like all the good stuff, you know, all the stuff you can't talk about in polite company. And they're measuring how activated people, like the level of arousal in the brain around these different stimuli. And the thing that was most excitatory was not sex or death or rock and roll, it was money. And money is profoundly emotional. And you could even say there's an argument to be made that it's the most emotional thing. Wow. And so behavioral finance is just finance that accounts for that messiness, that accounts for that emotion, and tries to create systems and processes that work with that messiness and not pretend it doesn't exist.
Well, give us an example of how you might use it.
So in the book, I talk about the power of purpose, the power of a why. People who see a picture of their children before they make a financial decision make better decisions, and they save twice as much as a control group. Totally irrational, makes no sense. Also, I will totally use it, right? I will absolutely use it. And that's part of what I've done at Orion in my day job, is to try and incorporate greater salience or greater visuals or greater vividness into the way that people think about their finances with respect to positive emotions. You know, another thing, someone who has a financial goal, sort of a dry, like a sterile financial goal. Okay, Tim wants to retire to Vail, right? So we go, okay, well, Tim wants to retire to Vail. Cool, we can plug that into our financial plan, but it doesn't do much. But if we helped him visualize it and say, hey, where on the mountain is it going to be? And what kind of trees are you going to plant? And where will you have coffee in the morning? And where will you hike? If we can amp up the salience of that, you're about 73% more likely to hit that goal. So again, that's totally irrational. There's no good reason why that should work. But since it does, I will understand that about you and I will exploit that. So it's knowing how humans operate and designing planning and portfolios and related things that meet humans where they're at to the extent possible.
Now, Daniel, that was a great example, except for that was my Vail dream, and Tim's is being on the beach in Portugal. So we can just switch the people here. Yeah. But I am the Vail ski guy. That would be. I'm all over doing that. But it is interesting when we think about as you said, the messiness of human life and the way that our brains operate, and that they don't operate in a normal, rational way that a classical economist would typically think about those things. As you said, shouldn't matter. A classical economist would say, you have a goal, it's a goal. It doesn't matter if you can visualize the coffee that you're drinking in the morning and the trees that are outside of your window versus I want to live in Vale. Those should have no meaning or no impact on what I do, and yet they do. What are some of the other psychological traits that kind of trip people up? I mean, if you were to, again, this is the fun part, right? This is the fun part where we go, wow, I know that, but I didn't know that.
So your exploration of the roots of behavioral economics is an awesome place to start for people who are interested in that. That was just incredible work. So hats off to y'all there. But in one of my previous books, there's something like 200-ish cognitive biases that impact the way we think about money. But I tried to break it down into what I call these meta biases, and I came up with 4. The one was ego, which is the various forms of overconfidence. We could talk about that in a minute. One was emotion, the tendency to think with our heart before our head. The third was attention, the tendency to react to things that are loud over things that are likely. And then the final one was conservatism, which is this sort of constellation of tendencies like status quo proneness, loss aversion. Like, we just like to play it safe. We like what we know. We don't like to take big risks. We like certainty. So those are kind of the big 4 to me. Thinking we know more and we're better than we are, being emotional, attending to things that are loud over things that are likely, and wanting certainty and safety.
Mm.
Yeah, well, let's actually talk about the last one, this conservatism, this status quo bias that can get in our way when it comes to the way we think about, the way we process money. Is that is that where you're going with that?
So it can, but consistent what we talked about earlier, it also, if we understand it, can be used to our benefit.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer. So my son does martial arts. My son does karate. And I'm really worried about his increasing size and his increasing skill in karate. So I'm trying to be nice to the kid. But
but he's going to kick your ass in no short order.
The day is coming that I'm not going to want to pop off to that young man. But so one of the things that he has taught me about is this idea of the circular theory of self-defense. So basically, if someone's attacking you, you want to roll with that resistance and let that person's exertion work against them and for you, and not try and just stop it cold. I think for many years, when we have talked about behavioral biases, we have taken the approach of stop it cold. Like, if you're status quo prone, like, cut it out, buddy. Like, buck up, be different, get it in gear.
Just stop being biased.
Yeah,
Just
stop being biased. Now but I think some of the most brilliant interventions, like if you look at something like the Save More Tomorrow program, which I would, this is, Thaler and Benartzi's program that basically locked in the auto withdrawal and the auto escalation of retirement savings. A simple but profoundly impactful development in finance. And the thing that's so brilliant about it, whereas historically we've said, well, humans are lazy and status quo prone, so we're going to kick their butts and we're going to teach them like how important it is to save, and we're going to teach them about the miracle of compounding and hope they do the right thing. Thaler and Benartzi said, you know what? People are lazy and status quo prone. So let's just let them be that. But let's let them make one different decision. Let's lock in that saving. And every time they get a raise, the saving gets bumped up. And then they're going to forget about it the same way they forgot about their HBO Max subscription. And they're just gonna let it rock. And that has been the biggest thing. So those to me are the most brilliant behavioral interventions, where we can take a human tendency that is ostensibly negative. You think about being lazy and status quo, bro, and you go, that's not great. Well, sometimes it is great.
Yeah.
You think about being emotional. I mean, the emotion is the crux of that thing that I was talking about before, about visualizing the place in Vail or Puerto Rico or wherever we're going. And like, that's emotionality too. So yes, emotionality can cause you to panic and sell everything, earlier this year when tariff madness is going on. But emotionality can also lead you to log into your account, see the picture of your kids, visualize your retirement in very personally meaningful terms with your advisor, and then do great things. So it's much easier as behavioral scientists to roll with resistance than to try and white knuckle our way to some virtuous human behavior that is really hard to come by.
As you're talking, it reminds me of a conversation that Kurt and I had yesterday. We were talking about how a lot of people just think when you tell them about a study and a particular revelation and uncovering a bias, and people are like, "Well, yeah, so what? Like, well, that's behavioral science. Well, that's totally intuitive.
Mhm.
I totally get that." But what you just highlighted was that the interventions aren't so intuitive. The
Right.
interventions are counterintuitive. It's understanding the intuitive nature of the human condition and developing a counterintuitive way of dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's in the book, I talk about River Jordan problems. This is from a story in the Bible, right? Where we're going to take them to church real quick. Where Naaman, this powerful centurion, this powerful warrior guy, he has leprosy. Sends his servant to the holy man, and the holy man goes, go bathe in the River Jordan. And Naaman effectively says, the River Jordan sucks. Like, the River Jordan's dirty. Like, what am I going to do? Bathe in the River Jordan? And the servant comes back to him and says, Master, if the holy man had asked you to do something complicated, you would have done it. So give it a shot. And he
Yeah.
does, and he's healed. That's the case with behavioral science. Sometimes we're looking for things that are scientific and lurid and complicated. And here we go with Save More Tomorrow, the easiest thing in the world, tens of billions in benefit from just the simplest little insight into human behavior. So it doesn't always have to be complicated. And sometimes the simplicity of the fix causes us to overlook it.
Again, the way that you state that and what we're talking about here, I think, is just so important for people to understand, because we too often discount all of that. I think another piece of the book that I found really interesting, and one that I wanted to really kind of dig in with you, is this moral aspect of wealth, right? And you talk about, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but you argue that people should do more work integrating their own moral philosophy with their personal finance. And so help us understand that. What do you mean by that, and how would I go about doing that, and why?
So there's a couple of reasons why I think this is important. I've been doing, you mentioned that this book is philosophical in nature
Yeah.
in a way that is unusual for finance books. And that's, excuse me, that I find that to be a huge compliment, because I've been doing a lot of research right now, and my next book will not be about finance at all. It will just be about meaning and purpose in life. And I'm
Cool.
actually really close to being done with it. And when I have looked into the science of meaning, because when you tell people you're writing a book on the meaning of life, it's like, okay, dude, like, right? You kind of get some eye rolls, which I understand. But when you look at people who live lives of purpose, there's really three things that they do well, and it's three B's. It's believing, belonging, and becoming. So becoming is they have a sense of who they want to be, and they're working to better themselves every day. Belonging is they have people who love them and who they love. And believing is they have some sort of roadmap for making their way through this crazy life. It could be a personal moral philosophy, spirituality, religion, whatever it is, but they have some sort of personal code that they live by. So I do unapologetically think that is important, whatever that looks like. And the research backs that up. Money is quite unexpectedly a beautiful way to live out this believing piece, because whatever you want the world to look like, right? Whether it's more women in seats of power, or greater kindness to animals, or greater like a kinder, gentler world for children, whatever you want the world to look like, whatever your moral framework, one of the surest ways you can vote for that world is by the way that you spend your money. And if you look at every powerful human rights movement of the last however long, right? How did we end apartheid? Well, by disqualifying South Africa from international sporting competitions and by boycotting De Beers, right? How did we end this? What was the lever to bring about change in the civil rights movement in the southeastern US? Well, it was lunch counter sit-ins and bus boycotts. These are profoundly financial levers, right? All of this. How did this country get kicked off? Throwing tea in a harbor. I mean, that's a form of financial protest. So whether it's financial protest like that and financial activism, or whether it's me taking my kid to the farmer's market every Saturday. And recently I took my kids there, which I do most Saturdays. And my son noticed that the spaghetti sauce we bought was, an order of magnitude more expensive than the Prego we usually get.
He noticed.
Wow.
This
kid will be a billionaire. If I could get 10% of his future income right now, I would pay good money for this. But yeah, if he's like, hey, that seems really expensive. And I said, it absolutely is, but we're not trying to get the cheapest spaghetti sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm trying to live in a world where on a beautiful spring morning, I can walk with my kids in a downtown and support local entrepreneurs. The way that I make that possible is by dropping 15 bones on spaghetti sauce. So that's how that happens, because if people like us don't do that, the farmer's market goes away. And so bring that same energy and that same activism to every part of your life, because where you spend your dollars are your vote. And however you're voting, you're going to get more of that. I vote a little bit too much for Little Debbie's and Diet Cokes lately, but however you spend your money is you're going to get more of that. The world will look more like that.
Yeah.
You also talk about time and the importance of how you spend your time. Ashley Willens wrote a great book a couple of years ago about time, and talked about how people in the world today, in the modern world, are time impoverished. Basically, this is something that you've kind of echoed recently. What can we do to be better at the way that we spend our time and making those time-related decisions?
Well, so what's interesting is the time impoverishment that you talk about. We all feel it. And if you ask me, are you time impoverished? I would be the first in line to tell you yes. And then every Sunday morning, I get my screen time report, and I could tell you that there's a level of self-deception there, and that there's a level of lack of accountability. Because what we know from the research around time is that, let's be honest, we have more time, more discretionary time than at any point in human history. I'm not saying we're not busy. I've got 3 kids. I have a big job, whatever. I'm not saying we're not busy, but we do have more discretionary time than any humans have ever had, ever. And what the research shows is that minute for minute, pound for pound, that free time goes to screens. And I am not a righteous crusader against screens. I love TV so much, I don't even really want to give it up. But I mean, if we're going to whine about not having much time, and if we understand how precious time is, I think it's a call for being critical and self-reflective on where that time is going, because the research is very clear that for most of us it's going to Netflix. And
Right.
that's if that's what you want to do, okay, but don't say you have no time. Just say, hey, I'm watching a lot of sweet shows right now, and give us some good recs, but at least be honest about where your time is going.
But I think there's an aspect there that this goes back to the psychology part of this. It is I don't want to spend that time in front of screens, particularly maybe social media. I know I fall into this all of the time. I need to go on for something for work. And all of a sudden, 40 minutes later, I realize I'm just, scrolled through. It's not even doom scrolling. It's just dumb scrolling, right? Where it is literally, I'm looking at stupid stuff and laughing at bad dad jokes and watching the new, Bigfoot AI things out camping with their stupid stuff. And yeah, I laugh a little bit. But if I had to look back at my day going, where did I actually spend my time? And is that where I wanted to spend it? That would probably not be it. And I think that there's a big issue there from a psychology perspective as we go forward.
In The Soul of Wealth, I'm going to forget the exact minutes in the study, but in The Soul of Wealth, I cite research that people who limited their time on social media to, I believe it was 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening, had a 10% boost in happiness. That
Wow.
is, and that's like not abstinence from social media. That's just sort of thoughtful consumption. That's not saying you can never get on Twitter. That's just saying be thoughtful about it. And I mean, a 10% increase in happiness, that's commensurate with like Prozac. I mean, that's like a psych med level of boost to your happiness. And so, yeah, I think the answer is just greater thoughtfulness. And again, I'll bring it back to my nutritional journey. The thing that I did to lose weight was just simply accountability. I mean, I literally just tracked calories and protein. That's all I did. Like, changed nothing about my exercise, nothing. Like, I tracked calories and protein. I didn't even stop eating sweets. In fact, the first thing I do every morning is I enter a full-size Snickers bar into my thing, because at 8 o'clock, by God, that is that is happening. I'm having, and like everything else can just kind of get in line. And I tell you, that Snickers bar at 8 o'clock hits like a Mack truck, because I have been waiting for it and anticipating it. Social media is fun. Social media is great. Bigfoot AI is fun. But when we consume it indiscriminately, whether it's calories or social media or whatever, when we consume indiscriminately, it loses its satiety. It loses those reward signals. So infrequent splurges are the best, I think, is the thing to remember there.
Okay, Snickers boy. We lost a major musical pioneer in songwriting this week, Brian Wilson. And I was wondering, do you have a favorite Brian Wilson song?
So, God Only Knows is going to be, of course, the top of my list, but a very close second for a very particular reason is Good Vibrations. And the reason is this: I listen to a lot of sad, spooky music, which is just what you would want from your friendly neighborhood shrink, right? Like, Radiohead is my favorite band. I met my wife over a shared love of Radiohead. Like, my musical tastes are just as dour and depressing as you would hope from someone in my position. But what Brian Wilson did with Good Vibrations is he put a theremin, the spookiest of all instruments, right, used to make Scooby-Doo ghost sounds and make sad noises. And he put a theremin in a summertime love bop. And that to me is the height of genius, to put the de facto spooky instrument in a song that was as upbeat as Good Vibrations is the hallmark of a great mind.
Tell people what a theremin is, because it's not like a guitar or a keyboard or a drum.
So a theremin is this thing you control it by the positioning of your hand, and it does the when
air.
Yeah. And so I don't even know how to explain it. It's got like an X and a Y axis, and you move your hand around the space, and the tone of the theremin. Yeah. But when you listen to Good Vibrations and it's like, woo, you like that? That's what it is, the theremin.
Yeah, it's the Scooby-Doo sounds, right? I mean, think of Scooby-Doo. It is the woo when the ghost comes in. That's the theremin. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I'm a big fan of Good Vibrations. Of course, God Only Knows is one of the most complex and simplest tunes. It's just really kind of amazing. But
start a love song. Start arguably the greatest pop love song of all time with "I May Not Always Love You."
Right.
Yeah. I may not always love you. This is incredible work. R.I.P.
And all the key changes. But I would agree with you on the Good Vibrations thing, because the vocal arrangement on that is just stunning. Like they just delivered something that they literally in concert could just reproduce so easily, so simply. And yet, if you've tried to sing the vocal parts to Good Vibrations, it ain't easy, Bop. It is a tricky song. It is a really difficult song to actually pull off. Yes. And I think that's just cool. What would you, if you had a desert island experience for a year and you could bring a listening device that could only have 2 musical artists on it, which 2 musical artists would you bring?
Okay, so the first one is super easy. The first one is Radiohead. I mean,
you would do it. You just would subject yourself to all that sadness.
Yeah, I'm on an island, man. I mean, I'm gonna be in my feelings. I'm stranded for a year. Yeah, I'm gonna say Radiohead for sure. Everything else is going to be recency bias. I've been listening to a ton of Turnstile lately. That's been my workout music lately. So we'll go with Radiohead and Turnstile, an upper and a downer.
Okay. So you're novelty seeking.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. All right, Daniel, what I know this is like picking your favorite child, but of Radiohead songs, do you have a top song from Radiohead?
I really kind of don't, but when pressed, I say How to Disappear Completely, because I love the story behind it. Tom York had a panic attack. They were beginning to get big.
Yep.
And he was having a panic attack right before a show. And so he was leaving the show. I mean, he was just freaking out and leaving his own concert.
Wow.
And so he got on the tube, just like, exit stage left to try and leave his show. But then he's mobbed by fans that are headed to the show, and he finds out that he can't escape. And so he goes, well, screw it. I guess I better just go. It's
that's a great story.
And he sort of resigns himself to performing, and he goes back and does the show. But I do love the song, but the story to me, of trying to escape from life and, not being able to, I just think is so great.
Kurt, do you have a favorite Radiohead song? Is it...
Fake Plastic Trees is probably, going back to their early work. It's just the storyline on that too, and the way that they use the lyrics to really talk about something else when they're talking about, Tom York is a great lyricist. Is just fantastic in that. So, yeah.
Daniel Crosby, thanks so much for being a guest on Behavior Grooves again. And we look forward to seeing you the next time as well.
You guys are awesome. Your enthusiasm for the work makes it easy to listen to. Thanks for doing what you do.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Daniel, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our behavioral judo brains.
I love that. Now, just for the sake of full disclosure, we didn't actually talk about behavioral judo in our conversation with Daniel. That term didn't come up.
No, but we talked about the martial art aspect of this,
Yes.
of rolling
Yes.
with your with our behavioral biases as opposed to trying to fight them off, right? This is an important piece, and I think it's the piece that we're going to groove on really extensively. But before we do that, I just want to say, hey, it's always, every time we talk with Daniel, every single time, I just take something away, I learn something, and I can apply it directly in my life. And it's just fascinating. It's not just fascinating, it's awesome.
Well, wealth is more than money. Wealth is more than a bank account number. Wealth is more than what you can buy with that money. These are, like, in some ways, it's kind of mind-blowing, but it's like these are just solid reminders that add value to my life to every now and then go, oh yeah, it's just not about the dollars on the paycheck.
I love the idea that this isn't just about the number in our bank account, that Daniel elevates this to a philosophical element, even the title, Soul of Wealth, right?
Yeah.
True wealth integrates financial resources with our personal values. It's not about what I can buy, how much money I have, and all of those biases that he talked about, ego, conservatism, all four of those
emotions
that we bring in, right? Impact that, not always in a most positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I think there were a couple other things before we get into the behavioral judo piece. Look, Daniel talks about this, and this is what I knew this, but I'm taking this again out of this conversation, is time is our most precious resource. And we need to be intentional about how we use it. I too often find myself freaking scrolling through social media. And that idea that, hey, you reduce social media use and you can increase your happiness by 10%.
Yeah. Or how about this? Another great reminder was pursuing sort of a more holistic view of life, like, having 100 things across the whole field of your life that you improve 1% is so much better than improving one thing 100%. Like, work on work a little bit on your mental health, work a little bit on your emotional health, work on your physical health. All of these things are worthwhile doing at the same time.
And the last piece on this is your financial choices. They're this powerful vote on the world you want to create. And for me, what that allowed, I know this. I know this at the very essence of who I am, but it almost allowed me to have it says it's okay for you to spend some more money on something, because what you're doing is building this world that you want to create. It's no longer about that dollar amount that I have in the bank account. It's about the world that I want to create, and I'm spending the money on that world I want to create. I'm spending a lot of money on my kids' education. That's okay, and I don't have to feel guilty about that or go, oh, how much we're losing all this money for our retirement. No, this is not. I want to spend that money on my kids so that they can have this better world. It's the donations that I make for, different things. It's the type of restaurants I go to, a number of those factors. And it's okay because that aligns with my personal values and helps me create the world that I want to live in.
Beautifully said. Okay, let's talk about behavioral judo. So,
working with our biases instead of fighting them.
So, the whole idea behind this I find fascinating, because it is about just going, this is who I am. This is actually who I am, and acknowledging that I have these biases that can become errors in my judgments. It's a great place. So awareness is a good place to start. It's not the whole story, but it's a good place to start.
Right. I think awareness is key, because if we're not aware, it's really important. But I think the piece, Daniel said this, and I'm going to quote here, so make sure I read this right. He said, "It's easier to roll with resistance than to white knuckle our way to virtuous human behavior." Okay.
Yeah, right. Boom.
Boom.
Yeah.
And there is an aspect of how we've been raised, at least myself, is that I'm always trying to be that virtuous person. I have an image of who I want to be. And oftentimes I have to fight myself. And the more that I can not fight, but instead roll with my biases, the better off I'm going to be.
Right. Because and in some ways, this is something our friend Christian Hunt says frequently. They're not bugs, they're actually features in our system, right? That these are things that if we understand how to leverage them properly and to work with them, this is just part of who we are, and it can actually enhance our lives. Let's talk about some examples of.
Well, actually, before we go there, I mean, I just want to go back because, again, this isn't new. Kurt Lewin talked about force fields, this idea of
right.
it's not just the pushing, it's the friction. And he said, oftentimes we can remove that friction to drive the behaviors that we want easier than by putting more effort into pushing. And too often we just focus in on pushing. So
that is behavioral judo right there. That
is behavioral judo.
Yeah.
Now, he should have called that behavioral judo instead of force field analysis. I think it would have gotten
Why didn't he? He just wasn't a very smart guy, I guess.
All right. So, what are some examples, Tim?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is something that you and I worked on a lot, and that is incentives and rewards, right? So it's such a common thought that the best incentive rule is one that just challenges the hell out of people, and the best incentive reward is cash, because then people can go out and do what they want. But it turns out that both of those things are myths. That the data actually reveals, the evidence from studies shows that actually the best incentive rule is something that makes me feel like the stretch is achievable. When I have a perceived sense of achievability, then I'm more willing to strive. It's just if it's too far out in the distance or too difficult, I check out. And then on the reward side, we want social status and well-being. That more money actually doesn't buy us those things. And sure, money is important to life. We're talking about the soul of wealth. Like, money is important, but when it comes to incentives and rewards, the research says go the opposite direction. Choose a rule structure that allows people to feel like their goals are achievable, and choose rewards that support their sense of social well-being or social standing and well-being.
I'm working with an organization right now. We're doing a whole bunch of interviews with senior leaders and executives. And part of this is around an IC philosophy. And what we're looking to understand is
IC being incentive
compensation philosophy. Thank you.
Yeah.
That we are looking to understand, all right, we have an annual forecast that has been talked to Wall Street. And if those forecast numbers, if the sales force isn't hitting it first quarter, second quarter, all right, we still have this recommendation out to Wall Street.
Yeah.
So we're just going to pile that, what you missed, into now Q3 and Q4.
So your numbers just got radically higher for actually no other reason than this is what we committed to Wall Street to.
We committed to Wall Street. We have to hit that number. And you get these executives who that's where their focus is. And to your point earlier, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? If that goal becomes so far out of reach, you have actually demotivated. So instead of actually having people be rewarded for hitting their number, you are taking that number and making it so far away that they just say, nope, I'm not even going to go. You're decreasing the performance of the organization.
Yeah.
Now, we have to work through this idea with executives and various different pieces on this. But this is a key aspect that I think many leaders have. They have this idea that to drive, we have to hold people's feet to the fire. We've committed to this. There's accountability. You can go in a number of multitudes of ways of justifying this. But in the end, what you're trying to achieve is increased motivation so that your salespeople are out there selling. That may not be the best way to achieve that.
Yeah. That's a great example, Kurt. What are some other examples of rolling with our biases? What are some hacks that we can do where we know that our disposition is set up in a particular way, our DNA, our genetic code leans this way when the world actually is kind of pulling us in a different direction?
So I think Daniel talks about some of this in our conversation. For listeners, get his book. It is fascinating. Multitude of chapters with really cool names like Love Lies and A Great Awakening, the sufficiency, Change the Dream, Scarcity and Sufficiency, The Search for Prosperity, all of the, and they're short. They're these little almost essays of this. And each of them is like this little spark of insight. But with that, I think one of the things that, one of these hacks, and it's not necessarily a hack, is just visualize your financial goals with the emotional detail in them. We know that our behavior is much more influenced by our emotions than it is by our rational brain. And if you can tie the emotional benefit of a financial aspect of what you're doing, you're more likely to make that behavior stick.
I want to just highlight one. You mentioned this earlier, but I want to say that this is really, really important. So I'm just going to reemphasize something you already said. And that is align your spending with your personal values. Yep. You feel better. By the way, it still has to be within your budget. You can't just be, a spendthrift all the time. But I think that alignment can really add a lot of value to your life.
We can get into really practical things. Use calendar blocking. As opposed to a to-do list or others, but put anything that you really want to do and that you have a plan for, make time on your calendar, block off an hour once a day or 2 hours every week or 30 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever it is. Block it off.
Yeah.
Commit to that. Make that easy for you to do because it's already in your calendar.
Or use Katie Milkman's fresh start model when it comes to starting new habits, new routines, things that are in your life. Say it's going to be on this Monday, on my anniversary, on my birthday, on the first of the month, whatever that day is that you want to pick. Make it a meaningful day to you and use that to say, I've got a fresh start going forward.
Or bring in Charles Duhigg and make sure your new routine or new behavior is tied to an existing behavior. That the idea of I will floss my teeth after I brush my teeth, and after that I will do whatever else it is.
Right.
That something that you're currently already doing, it makes it that much easier, right?
Yeah. Or Ayelet Fishbach, one of my favorite things from her is when you're working on big goals, do two things. Be flexible in the specificity of the outcome, and look back for progress. Keep your turn your head over your shoulder and go, hey, I've got this big goal out here, but I have made this much progress. Those are things that work. Those are all behavioral judo things that can make our life better.
Yeah. Now, these aren't necessarily behavioral judo tips.
No, I just said they are. They are.
No, the next ones that I'm going to talk about.
Oh, the next one. Okay.
So these are those are a lot of those are what we talked about, but the ones I'm going to bring up now aren't necessarily there. They're more of the push component, right? So the piece on making sure we spend our time where we want it and not to squander that most vital of our resources. So number one, track how you're actually spending your time. Track it like you're tracking calories if you're on a weight loss program. Where am I spending my time? Do that for a couple weeks and just see where your time is and see where you're wasting it.
Yeah.
With that, this is the big push, not the reduce.
Okay.
Limit your frickin' social media
Woo!
to 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the evening.
Yeah.
Or if
Set
you
a
can't
timer.
do that, again, that's a very specific number. Figure out what works for you and figure out the time, but put limits around it. Guardrail it in saying, I have this within here, that's fine. Once I get out of there, once I break over that guardrail, then I'm in trouble and I need to have ways of pulling myself back in.
I would add to that with this awareness can come more intentionality, right? You can be more intentional about how you want to spend your time. I want to, I'm going to limit my social media consumption in order to be intentional about how I'm going to spend my time, which of course is in itself a way of being intentional about how you're spending your time.
Well, we talked even before we got on this call about you wanting to spend more time with music, right? And being intentional about that. So,
yes,
just get off your lazy butt and do music. And no, you need to figure out where you can carve that time out and what can you give up, and being intentional about that. So,
yeah,
I just again, I want to really emphasize, I loved Daniel's perspective on this.
yeah.
It's not about the number in your bank account. I mean, the soul of wealth isn't about that. It's not about having more things in our lives. It's really aligning your financial goals, your financial behaviors with the values that you have in your life. And when you can do that, then you're going to be happier. You're going to be more content. You're going to have all those things. I loved the speed round question where Daniel said, damn, I could take more time off, right? I mean, don't increase my, money that I earn. I want time off. I want that time, and time is valuable. And so make sure that you guys are doing this.
So this behavioral judo thing, it's a great concept, right? So I think one of the big takeaways is it's not about white knuckling, to use Daniel's term, your way through this stuff. It's about changing the context of your world, right? It's about making decisions that roll with our biases rather than trying to force ourselves against them.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about becoming a different person. It's about becoming a smarter designer of your own environment, right? Like, work with the lazy, biased, emotional self that you are,
right?
Rather than trying to constantly fight against that. That's the thing that we need to take advantage of. We can hack those. We can use some behavioral judo to do that.
Use some of your laziness and your social media desires to go out and check out our Facebook community page, our behavioral groups community. And
I like how there you go. And actually, because that'll be intentional and it'll be valuable for you, and not just seeing what Kim Kardashian is wearing this week. Instead, you can get some behavioral science insights or be asked a very thought-provoking question that gets you to think maybe about how you can improve your life or what you should be doing today with our daily groove question. You should go out and check that out.
Use the daily groove question from the Behavioral Grooves community page on Facebook, or some of the insights that you took from Daniel's conversation today, and use them this week as you go out and find your groove.